is Megan Moore, and I'm doing my final presentation over White Knights. So I'm going to start with the plot of this short story. Basically, it's divided into 4 nights and a morning. And in the beginning, we're introduced to the main character, or the narrator of the story, and he starts to kind of portray himself to the audience that he's a lonely man, and he chooses to be. And so after his introduction, we're also introduced to his acquaintances in the town, and basically his acquaintances is the town, you know, and how he describes this is as he takes his walks. He walks across every house and basically comes up with a whole story, a whole meaning behind the house. And continuing on his long walk, we are introduced to a woman who seems to be upset, and he expresses how he's curious and interested about her. And so when he approaches her, she walks away, and then eventually the narrator kind of steps in and rescues her from another man who kind of caused her to be in more distress that night. And so he continues to walk her home as a gentleman. And on their walk to the house, you know, he kind of talks about how, you know, exciting this night is for him, because he's not familiar with becoming involved or, you know, talking to women because of how timid he is. And she kind of gives him credit for that. And, you know, after that, they kind of come to agreement, like, you know, they should get to know each other. And if they were to do that, then she suggests, okay, well, we will meet at the same place that we met every night, unless it's bad weather, but they will continue to meet every night to develop a friendship just as long as it remains platonic, no romance. Then we go into night 2. The narrator, or as I'm going to call him, the dreamer, you know, he expresses how he's really excited about this, and Nastenka is really curious about him. She wants to know more about him, like his history, but, you know, he's kind of baffled by this because he thinks, or as he explains, he has no history. He chooses, he explains to her how he chooses to be alone, and, you know, why he labels himself as a dreamer. And how I see this is that, how he explained it, is that to be a dreamer, you kind of save yourself from the misery of reality. And, you know, as he dreams, he can create his happiness with the fascinations and the idea of love, yet he has not put himself in a realistic situation to really experience that for himself. And so after he explains all this, Nastenka kind of feels sympathy for him, and, you know, she assures him, like, yes, we will be friends. I will accompany you. And then she feels comfortable to share her side of the story. And we learn that Nastenka is also a lonely person as well, but she doesn't really choose that for herself in a sense of, she feels more entrapped. And how she feels entrapped is because she feels sheltered by her grandmother that she lives with, and she goes further into the story of how she's always with her grandmother. She doesn't really have the opportunity to leave and to live life for herself. And so it kind of puts her in a spiral of depression and loneliness. And until she met the lodger that lived in her grandmother's house, he kind of began to, we're going to call him the lover. He began to give Nastenka stories, to kind of fall in love with, you know, these adventures in the stories, the moral of the stories. She fell in love with literature through him. And they kind of grow this connection as he respects the situation and the relationship between her and her grandmother. And so when the time comes that he has to leave, Nishtenka packs up her bags and she goes away from her grandmother. She goes up to the lodger's room with her stuff, and she practically cries and opens and of emotions and spills to the lodger like, she's in love with him. And the lodger kind of gets the idea that this is leading to the idea of marriage. And he assures her like, hey, I can't, provide for a wife right now. I'll only be gone for a year, but when I do return, you are my happiness. I want to be with you. And if that is to be it, then we shall marry when I return. And so the dreamer feels for her. His heart hurts for her. And so what he does is that, he suggests to her, well, why don't you reach out to him? And what he means by that is, he explains, write a letter to him, to reach out to him and say, hey, I am here, and I acknowledge that you are back, and, if you still want to be with me, please meet me. If not, then I release you from your promise. And so he suggests this because it will give her that freedom to be free of disappointment and being heartbroken, and to move on with her life the best she could. So now we go into night 3. The dreamer, he received a letter from Nishtenka, and he gives it, he follows the instructions that Nishtenka gave him as, give this letter to friends of mine that are in contact with her lover. So he follows that, and then he meets up with Nishtenka as she waits for a response from her lover. And in night 3, this is a particularly special night because this is when the dreamer realizes that he has fallen in love with her. And, he puts his feelings to the side because he did follow through with this whole arrangement of becoming friends with Nishtenka as long as it remained platonic. So he puts his feelings aside, and it kind of becomes hard for him to express what he's thinking and how he feels. He feels like he can't really open up to her because she's happy that someone like him, the dreamer, has not fell in love with him. She's completely confused. Like, normally I'm sure men would fall in love with her by this time, but he has expressed to her as if he had no romantic feelings towards her. So she expresses that to him, and she's like, but I love this. And this kind of keeps him from, being honest. So in night 3, she just finds that comfort. So now we go into night 4, still haven't heard from her lover, and Nishtenka starts to become distraught. She thought maybe she would hear a response from him, that maybe he would be a man and come to her and be honest with her, or at least write her and tell her, I'm sorry, but, it's been a year and I'm not in love with you, or something. And so the dreamer continues to comfort her. And, Nishtenka, she's still expressing like this love for their friendship and everything. And the dreamer he couldn't hold it in anymore. So he finally confesses to her his feelings, and it completely put Nishtenka into shock. And she's like, oh, well, okay, well, I don't want to lose you. I want us to continue to be friends, and maybe one day our relationship can become romantic. So this kind of hope for the dreamer, it's so real. It makes him happy. It's real. And he holds on to that hope. He said, okay, I'm willing to do this. They agreed that they will continue to be friends. They will work on their romantic relationship. After that, they start going on a walk together. And then they pass by this man, and Nishtenka freezes. And the dreamer's concerned. And Nishtenka realizes that that's her lover. that has walked past them, and the lover yells back for them because he knows he's seen Nashtenka as well. And Nashtenka she runs to her lover. She's finally reunited. She goes back to the dreamer, gives him a kiss, and then runs back to her lover. So then we're followed up with the morning, and when you read the short story, you can feel the loss from the dreamer, because he expressed his love, he had the hope of having love, and then in a glimpse like that, it ran away, it slipped. But he receives a letter from Nashtenka, and he realizes that, you know what, he's happy as long as she's happy. And really, the end of the story, it turns into his thinking that, you know, his time with Nashtenka, yet again, is another dream. So now the author of this short story, White Nights, written by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And he wrote this during the existentialism period. And what existentialism is basically the philosophical approach that the existence of an individual emphasizes that they have the free will to basically put their own meaning into life. And so, knowing this definition of existentialism, we always follow the question, what does it mean to be human? You know, what does it mean to live? And in an existentialist perspective, what it means to live is to be authentic, to be your true self, acknowledge your past, learn from your past, and, you know, you live your life, you choose to make these decisions that define life in your own perspective. And so I really, really appreciate White Nights. I appreciate Dostoevsky's work in this and looking at it in an existentialist perspective, because it shows the reality of unrequited love. It's not some fairy tale. It's not too realistic to where it's logic over emotion. It's pure authenticity, and it's something that kind of helps young people like you and I, or even older people, you know, to look in a whole different way of what loneliness means to someone, what love means to someone, and loss. And so that is why I think White Nights is important. Thank you.